technology moves along a certain trajectory, and then this external thing, it kind of kicks it into a different direction.
If we want to replicate the spillover, do we need to wait for geniuses or do we need to teach people in a different way, or do we need some kind of structural changes in the future?
All of the above, at the level of individuals, at the level of research teams, at the level of research organizations and managers of these organizations, and at the level of funders. You need freedom of search, but it needs to be guided.
Hello, my name is Zahar Koretsky, and this is the Transitions Visions, a podcast series about and for the sustainability transitions community. What is technology spillover, and how does it influence inventions and innovation? How does a Japanese firm in the 80s advance abandoned work of American scientists of the 70s so that in 2010s Chinese photovoltaics are exploding the market? This episode, I talk with Sergey Kolesnikov, research fellow at the University of Cambridge and deputy director of the Cambridge Center for Environment, Energy and Natural Resource Governance. Last year, he led a publication in Technovation Journal on the methodology of technology spillovers. And there they talked about solar photovoltaics as a case. This episode, I discuss with Sergey the history of the American photovoltaic industry, especially at DOE, the US Department of Energy, and the role of adjacent fields that technology and knowledge can travel to. Please enjoy this conversation and stay tuned for more Transitions Visions. And by the way, if you are a long-term listener, you can now send me a virtual coffee using the link in the description. You don't have to, but it would help me to keep the lights on and also make me happy. And who knows, maybe with your help I will soon be able to get an additional mic to record better sound in interviews in person. Thank you very much and enjoy the podcast. Hi, Sergey. Very nice to have you here.
Hello.
I wanted to talk to you about your last year's paper about spillovers. But maybe just to do it again, how is the UK currently? How is the UK academia doing?
Oh, I think everywhere it's a problem. I think, yeah. Do you know any country that would have a good situation in academia? So there are always problems. I mean, I think the biggest problem for the UK is that, like for the sector specifically, so there are not yet like cuts in research budgets, so there is still development ongoing in terms of like opening new opportunities or opening new grant programs and whatever. So in terms of research funding, I would say that the situation is quite okay, so it's possible to get funding on this side. However, there is a very big problem on the side of education and teaching that kind of harms financial sustainability of universities in the UK because tuition fees are fixed in the UK, so they're set by the government, particularly domestic tuition fees. So they're fixed and they're not keeping up with inflation. And obviously everyone, so if you try to hike the tuition fees for domestic students, everyone starts protesting. And yeah, and it's bad for the government if it's unknown. So there were no substantial. So there was like one single hike recently, like £500. Or something like that. But
are the protests still going? Student protests?
No, I mean, not about that. Students always find something to protest. So they are very active communities. So a lot has been going on in terms of student protests, but not about the student hikes at least. But the problem for universities is that so this. Costs are fixed, but the cost of running the university has been increasing in line with the inflation and with the overall cost of everything, and there has not been enough from the main source of funding from tuition fees to recuperate these increases. And again, Yeah, all the people working in the university expect, and they do not have enough sources of funding to recuperate it from teaching.
Yeah,
And with the overall, I would say, international student environment, yeah, there has been shocks to that as well. So less people coming from Asia, but particularly from
oh yeah,
Europe after Brexit. So there are just not enough to recuperate in terms of the costs
yeah,
from student tuition
mhm,
fees. And because of that, many universities are struggling. And even the biggest one, like Cambridge, where I'm based, are not completely immune to that. So we also have
yeah,
some overall kind of budget cuts. Across the line. So again, we are fortunate to be, I think, in a slightly better position than some other universities that had to do like staff cuts, which is horrible.
yeah.
But yeah, overall,
It's
so
just overall,
it's
yeah,
kind of good on the side of research, and there are
yeah,
I
yeah.
would say like decent opportunities that exist, but
Mhm.
in terms of the overall funding in the sector, yeah, so many universities are struggling. The sector is not doing
Yeah,
very good.
yeah, yeah. Well, sounds familiar from here, from across the
Yeah.
channel. So you are deputy director of the Cambridge Centre for Environment, Energy, and Natural Resource Governance. Can you
Yes.
can you tell a bit more about this center? Is it a think tank? Is it a faculty? Is it an independent institute? And what does it do? What kind of research does it do?
So it's a research center in one of the university departments. It's a Department of Land Economy. And I think one thing about the overall Oxbridge system, or let's say like Oxford and Cambridge system, is which is quite unique, is that we do have a lot of very interdisciplinary things, and they just naturally evolve around problems and topics. And because these universities are so old and kind of naturally developing around various topics, it's just impossible to kill things. So new things can emerge, old things either die out or exist indefinitely. And because of that, there is no clear structure of what subject or what topic you may find at any place in the university. So, for example, I know that people doing things related to science and technology and innovation studies are in at least 6 to 8 different research centers, institutions, departments, faculties around the university.
Okay.
So
Well,
there are a lot of horizontal networks that exist that try to compensate for that. So there is recently a new kind of STS network that was created
mm,
in the university by some activists in a different department, which is Institute for Manufacturing, so the engineering department.
mhm,
And I'm working on innovation specifically in areas of climate and energy. I'm
mhm.
working in the Department of Land Economy.
Yeah.
So land economy is the uh, uh, topic which is separate from the Department of Economics. Uh,
Okay.
it kind of incorporates, well, I would say economics, law, and governance of land use. So we have people working on legal side of things, policy side of things, and the economics of land use, and land use understood very broadly. So we
Yeah.
have people working on planning, growth, and development, on regional development. So we have people working on real estate finance, and this is kind of the most, I would say, popular part of the degree in land economy. And we also have a lot of people working on climate and environment. So it started historically from this lens of natural resources and natural resource governance and use. So this is
Mm.
why the name of the center mentions these things.
Mm,
So
mhm.
naturally it started from like historically the whole department was created in 1920s after the Great War to where a lot of people who returned from this war suddenly found themselves being uh, uh, basically a land aristocracy,
Mm.
landowners in UK that wanted to do scientific management of land. So it all
Mm.
started as kind of a program in the state management.
Wow.
Well, and very quickly by, like in 20, 30 years, with the priorities changed. So it was not about, scientific management of land. So it's about various problems related to natural resources, many other things. And this is how the whole topic of climate and energy emerged in this context. So how do we efficiently deal with resources that we have in the land, including mining, critical materials, minerals, and oil and gas, and this is where you get to energy, and then just land use. You have the link between land use and climate change, and this is how we kind of get to this overall topic. The focus of the center, so it's a research center that focuses on economics, law, governance, and of environmental transitions, as we call them. But this means whatever is happening with climate change. It involves obviously energy transition, sustainability transitions, and this is how we kind of got to this topic. It's a very interdisciplinary place. We have people working like with backgrounds in economics, in law, in climate law specifically. So that's kind of our specialization in university climate law. And we have people with background in engineering and science, like myself. So my original degree was in physics, and then I got some training in public policy. So we have public policy people, and we actually apply all this knowledge, interdisciplinary knowledge and background that we have in the research that we do. So that's kind of very interdisciplinary research center in the department, which is already very interdisciplinary because we are looking at it from the problem of how we use land and what do we do with it and how we can, manage it and foster it. And so it's problem oriented, it's applied, and because of that, we need many disciplinary lenses to look at it. And this is then reflected like in the miniature in our center, which is focuses on specifically like climate, environment, and energy.
Yeah. But now I'm wondering, so I wanted to talk to you today about this, about your last year's paper, and its title is A Framework and Methodology for Analyzing Technology Spillover Processes with an Application in Solar Photovoltaics. But I see that there are six authors, and only two of them are from the Center of Cambridge Center of Environment, Energy, and Natural Resource Governance. So it's a bit outside. No, this topic is a bit outside of the interest of most people in the center.
It is a part of the center. So I would say we have three main areas in the center. So one is environmental biodiversity economics. So that's there's a lot of research, for example, on economics of carbon credits, of deforestation policies, and how these things are linked. So on evaluation of various policy schemes for this. Then we have a large area of climate and environmental law. I didn't go deep there. I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't be comfortable talking about legal research. But the other part is policy. So we look at it specifically from the public policy lens. And it happened that, there was this project. So the project was founded by the Sloan Foundation in the US, so charitable foundation in the US. And was mostly based in Harvard, but Cambridge was one of the partners in this project. And it happened that we wanted to look at the various ways by which we can look at the evolution of technologies and clean energy specifically. So the focus is on clean energy technologies and how basically innovation proceeds in these technologies, and how can we support it with policy? So can we use public policy to accelerate energy transition, and looking specifically at the subset of various measures that are needed for energy transition, so innovation in clean energy technologies. And I joined the center 6 years ago, specifically to look at kind of this intersection of policy and innovation and energy technology. Because as I mentioned, my original background in training is in physics, so I kind of understand these technologies very well, but I also understand policy. And we kind of needed both lenses to look at this problem. So I kind of happen to be a person who has these lenses. But that also goes to the And say I must mention one of the authors of the paper and director of the center, Professor Laura Di Zenadon. So she's currently professor of climate change policy in the department and director of the center. She also has training in chemical engineering and public policy. So we're kind of a group of what we would call it like engineering economists and public policy scholars who look at technology and understand how technology works, but also we understand how policy works and what is needed and what are these levers beyond just research and development that are needed to help advance innovation towards, what we call it in jargon, like large-scale deployment. So to scaling up these technologies that will help us transition away from fossil fuels towards low-carbon energy systems.
Yeah. I wanted to jump into the paper actually now, and I wanted to ask you all sorts of things about it. And maybe I can start with just the main, for me, interest is how did you trace technology? How do you, what did you look at? What was the unit of observation? How did you trace it?
Yeah. So maybe I should kind of start with the overall framing of the problem, here, and to explain what do we mean by technology spillovers. Because, after the project completed, I would say that maybe like framing it around specific term spillovers was maybe not the best framing, in the sense that there are so many ways this term is being used in the innovation studies, in innovation economics, and just knowledge economics, but also in environmental studies. So that every time you mention the word spillovers, you need to explain what we mean. So in this case, we talk about specifically technology spillovers. Like generally in, as we know, like in innovation theories or spillovers is the phenomenon is that when someone develops new ideas and new knowledge or whatever, they cannot fully control the flow of knowledge, because knowledge is in a sense public good, so it's very hard to control who and how uses it. So as long as knowledge is out there, anyone can use it. So it's very hard to control. And to control for it, many other things that have been introduced, first and foremost, in intellectual property policies, so patenting. Well, knowledge is out there, but you cannot use it for a certain amount of time when the patent is working. So the spillovers, in just a classical theory, is just knowledge literally spills over from the place of people who produced it and being repurposed and used by other people, firms, in other places. So a lot of the conversations in science innovation studies about spillovers, they revolve around these knowledge externalities or knowledge spillovers as problem of difficulties with appropriability of knowledge. So in our case, yes, we also talk about knowledge flows, but in this case, we talk about what we call technology spillovers. So when knowledge from different areas of science and technology gets repurposed for specific innovation in another technology. So there are many quite famous actually cases of how like turbine technologies that were originally developed, for example, for jet planes are now being used in energy. So gas turbines used in power stations, or wind turbines. So a lot of knowledge that was developed in one area related to like aircraft, planes, or aviation, and then also including like gas turbines or hydropower turbines. So a lot of this knowledge got repurposed when we talk about wind turbines and wind energy. So our definition of technology spillovers is knowledge that got developed for one purpose or one area, and then got repurposed for a new purpose in a new area. So this is how I understand technology spillovers. And we just see that was one of the major focuses of this whole project, because yes, we see that in the traditional analysis, including economic analysis and innovation studies, people recognize that yes, this thing is happening, and people try to study it at the level of different domains, but it's very hard to include it in the economic analysis, like in the cognitive analysis. So or in the modeling of innovation, or in the modeling of climate. So how do you incorporate these synergies that essentially exist between different technological areas? So we know for a fact that when there's so much knowledge being developed, like in one area of technology, like as I mentioned, like in oil and gas industry or in aviation industry, that dramatically reduces the cost of innovation in wind energy. But these cost reductions, they are not included in the models that are being used to do technology forecasting, like cost into the future. And then these models of technology forecast, they become parts of the climate and energy models and climate systems. So we do, like on other projects, we do work with modeling teams, integrated assessment modeling teams in Europe who provide some guidance of the European Commission and as part of the IPCC assessment reports. So that kind of part of my job in those projects is to look at how these models work. And I should say that, yes, in many cases, it's very hard to model these like dynamics of technology and innovation, the way that would fully incorporate the costs of these synergies that exist between, including between different technologies. So that's just one of the things that is not like properly incorporated into these models. And as a result, many of these models, they consistently produce they overestimate the costs and underestimate the benefits of energy transition and investment into energy technologies. So we know that, yes, the progress is happening, but nobody is able to quite well predict it. So my colleagues did a very interesting study. So it was published in 2021, I think, in PNAS and Proceedings of National Academies of Sciences, where they just looked at technology cost forecasts that were made around 2010 and what they predicted in terms of the future costs of different number of clean energy technologies, including photovoltaics, including lithium-ion batteries, electrolyzers for the hydrogen production, some other technologies. And they just looked at what models predicted, what experts predicted, and what actually happened. Yes, models consistently underestimated it, but I should say that models were still better than expert decisions. So experts were particularly bad at predicting what will actually happen in the future. So, and one of the reasons is not that they are, intentionally do this. So no, it's just the whole transition that is ongoing is a very complex process, and the models are already extremely complex, and they constantly work on improving these models. And one of the things is that still the area of improvement there is representing this technology dynamics, and one part of it is just understanding how we can take into account these synergies that exist between different areas of science and technologies, and how we can kind of plan this in a more future developments of technology in a way that would leverage the synergies instead of kind of working against them. So this is why there was this major focus. I just talked about these models and everything. And then once we started working on the project, we actually realized that we need to understand that at a very I'd say micro level of innovation. So how innovation actually happens, how knowledge exchange happens, like as it goes. So the unit of analysis in this study, in this particular paper, is individual, as we call them, spillover events. So typically, technology spillovers, when they analyzed, they are understood more as either knowledge externality, as I explained before, or as part of this recombinant innovation process. So there are many recombinant innovation theories that, okay, knowledge, like innovation, proceeds by recombining pieces of existing knowledge and developing new pieces and bits. So it's a little bit like a puzzle that gets kind of, or like 3D puzzle that you can kind of shuffle, construct, or like Lego, construct new things out of this thing. So the recombinant innovation theory. So we specifically look at how this external knowledge, what we call external to the specific area in which we are focused on. So in this paper, it focused on solar photovoltaics. So how knowledge from our areas got discovered, identified, recognized, and then utilized and integrated into this innovation process, so that it became a part of this photovoltaic domain. And yes, well, by the way, in this project we also did for two other technologies. So we also have work done on solid-state lights and light-emitting diodes and lithium-ion batteries. But this paper specifically focused on solar photovoltaics and a subset of innovation. I would say actually manufacturing process innovations in this technology.
Manufacturing process innovations, yeah. So that was the kind of the focus, only the manufacturing.
No, it just happened. So we have like a long list of discoveries that initially these were like some scientific discoveries, then technological inventions, and then we also tracked how they proceed all the way to being integrated into manufacturing, to the production of these technologies. And it just happened that in this particular paper, the most interesting and kind of illustrative case for show the strength of our process-based approach to looking at this innovation and spillovers. It just happened to be this manufacturing process technologies. And the way they eventually, some of them, not all of them actually, got to the stage of their being actively used right now in production. So the key point is that we're not looking at just scientific discoveries and inventions. So R&D stage. We try to look at the full life cycle of innovation from emergence of original ideas and the process of scientific discovery or some other sources, and all the way up to the large scale production. So it's actually massively used technology. So it just happened that in this case, these specific discoveries innovation were in manufacturing processes, but we had some cases, interesting cases, where it was more about components of the technology or architecture of the technology. It's just that the cases were not as illustrative. So this paper we kind of also focused on showcasing our conceptual framework, where we go one level deeper to the micro level of innovation, and methodology for tracking actually these processes, just to demonstrate them. We are currently working on a paper that synthesizes our findings from all three technologies. And so it will have a larger subset of these solar photovoltaic innovation cases where we found a very significant role of technology spillovers. So we're working on it. So it's still to come with other
cool.
that go beyond just manufacturing.
You're talking about trajectories, so spillover processes as trajectories of technology changes.
Yeah, so we kind of reconstruct technological trajectory as a sequence of events.
Right.
Mostly discoveries, inventions, creation of the prototypes, and then events that are related to the launch of new products and manufacturing. And then even when it's sometimes possible to track what's going on with those projects. So we look at the full life cycle of innovation and reconstruct the sequence of events as a technological trajectory. So one important caveat is that it sounds like a linear model of innovation. I would like to highlight that it isn't, because its processes are different from linear, and we actually see that there are, particularly in these cases that we just discuss in this particular paper, we have when innovation stopped for a very significant amount of time, and then it resumed after 30 years, coming from other sources that actually kind of been saved. Actually, this technological development was saved by the fact that it has been parallel developments in the semiconductor industry, and then it kind of went back to the innovation stage. So it's anything from linear, even though historically, yes, if we talk about successful technology becoming a thing on the market, then there is a certain linear historical aspect to it. Yeah, so it's a historical approach, but it's not linear. So, and what we look at this trajectory, so we construct this trajectory, and when we look at these individual events, and we try to find cases in which we see that specifically knowledge from outside areas, so in this case from outside photovoltaics, was very important in this particular moment for the development of the specific innovation, for it to proceed to the next step on this trajectory. So, this knowledge comes from many different areas. In the case of semiconductors, in the case of photovoltaics, the most important source is semiconductor technology, and essentially solar photovoltaics is a semiconductor technology. But for very not for a long time, but in 1960s and early 1970s, it was discussed as in the context of this. It is one case of semiconductor technology. But once different applications started to appear, it required different manufacturing processes. It required different specialized process of just making things, but also new architectures for the semiconductors. So this specialization happened, and the kind of split into two separate technologies started around early 1970s. So, and there has been a lot that has been going on. So that's kind of a starting point, almost a starting point in the story, even though we trace it back to 1960s when the regional development started in this area. But yeah, so this divergence occurred, I would say, around early 1970s, where people, particularly under the influence of the energy crisis that happened around the time, it led to a lot of policy changes, like the creation of Department of what then became Department of Energy in the US. And so there were a lot of policy changes, and people for the first time started actively thinking about making solar energy the source for electricity as a part of our energy systems. So, and at this stage, the technology started to diverge. By semiconductors, I mean, in this case, chip manufacturing. So chip manufacturing and solar photovoltaic manufacturing, they diverged and turned into two different technologies. But this exchange of knowledge continued throughout it still continues to this day. But we also found links to some other less obvious areas, let's put it this way, like optics.
You are looking at, you're tracing knowledge produced in relation to a technology. And your approach was historical, so looking at not only patents, but also scientific publications. What else?
Yeah. And whatever else we can find. So yes, so we call it like a process-based approach. So there's the overall methodology in social and political sciences called process tracing. I would say that we kind of inspired by this methodology. We do not necessarily exactly follow it because we just have too many events to reconstruct, but it was clearly an inspiration for us. So process tracing in this case. So we identify a certain event, a certain innovation, and we try to find as much as possible information about what were the sources of knowledge that were used and how this innovation occurred, in which way, and how this knowledge was utilized. And typically we start by identifying seminal patents, because there has been a lot of information about the trajectories of innovation in photovoltaics in general. So there are recognized events that there was some kind of major groundbreaking discovery was made.
Yeah.
So we start looking at the pattern. So who are those people who did this, discovery? And then we contact them and talk to them. How did they do this? So we had series of interviews. So they were actually this series of interviews, like for photovoltaic technology, they actually occurred even earlier than the project started. They became an inspiration for the project when they talked to. Well, the original idea was let's look at this, trajectories of innovation. Let's talk to inventors and how they did this, what factors helped them to proceed with their with their inventions. And in many cases, it turned out that yes, it was like inspiration that they got from some other place, and this is how the project kind of coalesced. And for photovoltaics, it was done like before me, before I joined the project. I was involved in the interviews for like another paper that I did on solid state lighting. It was obviously super interesting to talk to people how they perceive the whole process of invention that they did. But that was just one. One of the sources of information that we used, because let's look at the patterns. So what kind of information we can get in the patents? Citations. So citations are supposed to trace the knowledge sources. There are many problems with patent citations as a source of information. They have been well recognized in the community. I didn't go too much into that, but just so there are citations that are not actually added by inventors, sometimes they're added by examiners, and sometimes citations are strategically added or not added, so they do not fully represent the sources of knowledge that has been used, that was used to develop or to come up with a particular invention that then got patented. But it's a noisy source of information, but it's still some information. In many cases, it also cites scientific papers and reports that contain the source of original discovery of the idea. This is how we got to scientific publications. And sometimes you also want to learn more about what and how it has been going on. So in this case, for this paper, the particularly useful and illuminating thing was, and very helpful for us, is that a majority of innovation that occurred in photovoltaics in the 1970s was done in the Department of Energy as part of the large-scale, it was called originally low-cost solar array program. Then it was retitled into flat solar array. So it started in 1975 and existed for 10 years. And it is responsible for most of the groundbreaking discoveries and innovations, or inventions. I should be more clear with the language. That eventually led to the formation of what we can call a dominant design of the photovoltaic technology for several decades, so-called aluminum surface backfilled configuration of solar cells. So it has been on the market for 30 years, and it only started to change around 2008, 2010, when already, due to other events in Germany, in Spain, and then in China, they just transformed completely the overall situation for photovoltaic innovation, just for solar energy. But that's kind of a different story. So now we're going back to 70s. It was a very interesting program because it was actually a public-private partnership. So it was coordinated by and funded by Department of Energy, but coordinated by NASA. Well, they have historical, specifically Jet Propulsion Laboratory of NASA. They originally saw photovoltaics was developed as technology for space. And then once energy crises started to occur in the 1970s, they started to think about terrestrial applications. And this is where, that was one of the first major initiatives of the Department of Energy. But also, there was a lot of funding for private firms and industry. both startups and corporations, and it was done in a very coordinated and also kind of competitive way. So there is a certain roadmap that was done, certain technological pathways that were identified, in which we can succeed towards a particular target of certain amount of production at a certain amount of cost. And they also had a public procurement program to actually buy. So Department of Energy had this program to buy solar cells produced at this as a result of this project. So there was even early demand created to actually sell this and recuperate the cost of innovation. So it was a very cleverly designed program, and I would say it was very successful. And also why it was cleverly designed, because we are in early stage of innovation. We can produce something. But the efficiency of solar cells in the 1970s is obviously very low, and they're quite costly. So let's try to bring down the costs by innovating, and then also scaling it up. So that was very important. That it included the part for creating large-scale demonstration facilities and manufacturing facilities. So that was the ultimate target of the program, to create manufacturing capacity for solar photovoltaic innovation. And it's not clear how we will arrive there in 10 years. So let's start by investing in all those parallel developments, in parallel potential sources of cost reductions and increases in efficiency on different kind of technological pathways. And let's fund private industry and whoever succeeds. So there was a competition. Whoever succeeds then gets to produce it. One caveat that I think was very important, and we were very lucky to have it, because it was still a publicly funded program. So all the firms and overall program leadership had to provide quarterly reports on the progress in this. And through this, we were actually able to track very in minor detail what exactly was developed, how, so with numbers and everything. So we were very lucky to have this 10 years of reports from this program, quarterly reports and also final reports that summarize this, whatever happened there. It's a publicly available reports. And I think the downside of that for the companies was that it didn't make much sense to patent. Yeah. Some of the things, they were allowed to patent things, but again, they had to disclose certain things in public reports. Congress at the time poured significant money into this program specifically. And then it came to a grinding halt in 1981 with the election of Ronald Reagan as the president, and they changed the change of the policy and administration there. So the program was defunded and descaled. So it said that, you can still fund this project, but only for early stage research and maybe some early stage technology development, but definitely not for manufacturing. This is what is supposed to be done in that. So this was the period where the whole topic of industrial policy or technology policy became no in American politics. And many firms were disappointed. Some went out of business. And essentially the center of gravity for photovoltaic innovation then shifted elsewhere from the US. So it shifted to Japan, to Australia, to Italy. We kind of had to reconstruct the network of these events through sources talking to inventors, looking at the patents and looking at their content as well as what they cite, looking at the original publications. And then at these reports, which not only describe what was developed, but also the context behind it, what was successful, what was not, and what did it go into the manufacturing. And then we kind of extended this process into later history. So again, we were lucky because for photovoltaics, this history is very well tracked, the history of innovation in this area. And we were able to track it all the way up to about 2019, 2020. Some of them were very useful in chip manufacturing, and the technological development continued and innovation continued in semiconductor manufacturing. But some was actually taken on board, particularly with laser doping. And it has been at the stage of research development for several decades, but by the mid 2000s, and particularly by the late 2000s, when there was a huge and growing demand for solar photovoltaics due to existing policies, particularly in Germany, feed-in tariffs for solar electricity in Germany, they created this boom in demand for solar energy. And at that stage, there was a lot of market competition, and finally, laser dropping in the early 2000s broke through to kind of next generation photovoltaics and solar cells that were being produced and marketed. And by now, it's just overwhelmingly dominating technology.
So in a way, you kind of reconstructed a genealogy of this technology, starting from a very small to a very kind of large tree, converging on a dominant design. In the paper, you write that ion implantation in photovoltaics was abandoned for several decades, made a comeback from the semiconductor industry when it became economically promising in the 2010s. So can you say a bit more specifically on how this comeback took place? Was it a complete rediscovery? Probably not. Was it what kind of spillover mechanisms? Is it human mobility? Is it something else? Is it more?
So Japan played a critical role in just maintaining the momentum throughout the 1980s once this technology was abandoned in the US. So it was developed by specifically Hitachi in Japan. So they created this equipment, and it kind of became a niche thing. So there were other just cheaper manufacturing processes like thermal annealing. So ion implanters, they did not receive like further development, particularly after the DOE program was descaled. So again, it was already like a prototype of manufacturing equipment. DOE program could not support development in manufacturing, so there was no R&D to be done, no further development, so it kind of just stopped. So there was potential, but it was not developed further. In the meantime, with the ongoing chip revolution, famous Moore's law and the scale of the expansion of the production of engineered transistors and what we call chips, that combination of transistors. Eventually, it became cost competitive there, but due to the smaller chips became, the harder it became to process the chips after thermal annealing. And with ion beams and later with lasers, you can actually do it very precisely, in much more precise way than you can do if you just put it in a furnace. And it became critically important once the chips started to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So at some point they became kind of complete, and now it is just one of the ways. So this standard, I would say, chip manufacturing process. Again, it is dominated by laser beams, but ion implantation is still kind of significant part of it, but particularly for specialized chips. So
in DOE, it was not a confidential technology. It was not. They published about it, right? So that's
but also when you have a piece of manufacturing equipment, yes, you can put you still need know how it works.
But I'm wondering how Japan developed that by themselves, or did they know about it from the literature? Did they?
There were clearly links. I have very distant evidence. So these reports were publicly available, sure, but there was no internet. They are publicly available now on the internet, which allowed me to read them. But then they specifically had to send Japanese engineers to the Library of Congress or something like that. So these visits that, and particularly in the 80s, maybe at the end of 70s, it was not such a big thing. And we know that there was this big scare about the growth of Japan, so it became this thing that at this moment it's China, so in '90s it was Japan. So the reason for doing things in US, politics around technology and innovation. So literally, like they visited these libraries and read these reports and they cited them. So I found evidence of that in the papers and specifically in the publications and report of those Japanese scholars and specifically engineers. It's mostly engineers, not scholars, so like scientists. So they worked for firms and they still published and presented this in conferences and they presented it in papers. So, and I just looked closely at what they cite, and they cited some of these reports. And I know that these reports were not on the internet, so you had to physically go there, and I saw like evidence of these visits that happened. So it was very interesting. So there was clearly some knowledge exchange happening, but by this stage, Japan was already very good at this technology, so they had absorptive capacity to kind of build on that. So they did their first ion implanters just a year later than it was done in the US by a firm called Spire. So and then so it became a thing. Yeah, so an implantation.
Yeah. So, and in fact, this is the spillover effect that you are describing. This is one manifestation of spillover.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about. So you have this. So you're using this paper as a frame, as constructing a theoretical methodological framework. You have this nice graphic, quite complex. Dense in information, and you use this as a case. You use PV as a case study. So you've partly mentioned the different. You mentioned the event sequence kind of process as a way of describing spillover process. So if you could briefly go over this framework and say what is the core. How would an ideal spillover process look like?
Ideal.
In a vacuum.
In a vacuum. I mean, at the core is the knowledge exchange event, so what we call a spillover event. So the very thing that this knowledge gets not just recognized, but actually used. So we have a certain mechanical analogy. So we have this figure in the paper with a mechanical analogy. So, trajectory. So in a sense, technology moves along a certain trajectory, and then this external thing, it kind of kicks it into a different direction. So it gets integrated into those, so it gets kicked into this trajectory and moves its different direction.
Right. So for example, defunding of DOE.
Yeah. So, I mean, it clearly just delayed the trajectory. So it delayed the innovation because there were a lot of funding and resources poured in, and also both firms were involved and public institutions were involved. So it was like very quickly progressing kind of innovation pathway. And then it all came to a grinding halt, and there was a delay for many decades. So as I would say in the paper, so some of these specific innovation trajectories got delayed or moved elsewhere. So these developments were happening in other countries, but then pushed back to the stage of research. So the other countries had to kind of rediscover from scratch some of the things, or maybe, again, working in the labs, you cannot work on manufacturing equipment. You have to solve other problems first, or the focus of innovation changes. So in this case, specifically what led to this groundbreaking work was specifically in Australian University of New South Wales. Innovation takes a lot of time, so then it got to the stage of actual manufacturing where it got adopted by manufacturers of solar cells only by around 2010. So in this case, I kind of diverged away from your question. So going back to the question of I would say, how ideal process would look like. So we just consider it to be two different blocks of knowledge that interact with each other. And this interaction changes the trajectory of innovation. And when we look at the factors that affect this process, so we have the source technology, we have this external technology, we have a domain boundary with which they interact. So how low or how high this kind of cognitive barrier between technologies? So we see, for example, that there are many more cases of spillovers where this cognitive barrier is lower. Okay, so semiconductors is kind of a related technology to photovoltaics. So this barrier is much lower than if we would utilize knowledge from, I don't know, fishing rods or satellite communications or something like that. If this barrier is lower, then yes, it's kind of easier to discover this knowledge and absorb it. And then the critical thing is that, again, we think it's not about this interaction and whatever, how this external knowledge was used, but how it then became a part of this technology. So how it got integrated into it. So we separately developed like some methodologies for tracking this knowledge integration using like pattern data. So how we can see how some external piece of knowledge eventually becomes a part of the knowledge. So there's the whole problem in this whole analysis of technology domains and how you paint the boundary. So for us, this boundary is dynamic. So we look at how something is outside this boundary and then it becomes kind of moves inside. So we are able to track it. So that's, and then we look at kind of the final state of this trajectory. So when the external knowledge is integrated and how it changed the technology. It's hard to, like the obvious bias of this approach is that hard to imagine counterfactuals. Where would technology go if this innovation wouldn't have happened? But in some cases, we are still able to discover and found these counterfactuals. I think the most famous case is, it's actually not in photovoltaics, it's in our other paper on solid-state lighting, where the light-emitting diode technology existed since 1960s, but these were mostly like red indicator lights. And there was a lot of work to develop for light-emitting diodes that would emit in other wavelengths, so the light would be of a different color. And you cannot use any colored light in general lighting applications. So to have general lighting, to use this very efficient source of light, you need to have white light. And for a very long time, the developments in this area was, okay, let's just develop RGB LEDs, so red, green, and blue, and mix them in white light.
And hope for a white light,
yes. There were like prototypes that actually achieved this, and this actually still exists in, on the market. Currently it exists, but only after this LED revolution actually happened. So on the market it exists in this multicolored LED like light bulbs that you can kind of buy, that actually has this, some of the designs of it actually have this different, just 3 different colored LEDs, and then you either turn them on all of them at the same time, or just a few of them in different combinations. So it actually still works, but the revolution in lighting and solid-state lighting happened once they discovered that, okay, we have been using phosphors, the chemical compounds that just convert the color of light, color of whatever is emitted, they just change the color. It originally was used in luminescent lighting. They had been extensively used in television sets, so in TV. So the CRT, so cathode ray tubes, used phosphorus to emit light and convert it from other sources. So these materials existed for a very long time. In the chemical industry, produced them. So it was used in televisions, like in X-ray, like medical technology. So this technology exists further, and it was specifically a chemical firm, Nichi, and engineers in that firm that they were producing these phosphors. They were working on it. And it happened that one of their scientists made a groundbreaking discovery with other colleagues. So Shuji Nakamura, who got a Nobel Prize for the discovery or like for creation of the blue light emitting diode, which was that was a groundbreaking groundbreaking thing. So the first time he created an LED light of the blue color. And then the question, okay, so should we now mix it with red and green LEDs that already existed? So there was still a problem. Okay, green LEDs existed, but they were not very powerful. So people kind of tinkered with that. But then, just after several years, look, we actually have these forces. Why don't we just try to apply them to this new blue LED light? And it worked. And very quickly, it literally took less than a year for them, once they realized that this can be done, to actually start producing them. So by late 1996, this furniture started selling these white LEDs. And basically create this revolution in lighting that we have today. So there were obviously like many problems, and a lot of the innovation was supposed to happen then for them to reach the market. But this process, then it took less than 10 years to get them actually at the market at scale. Look, maybe a little. So that's a different story. But the point is that there was like this massive, absolutely massive change that happened in the technology because of the spillover. So it just completely shifted it into a different direction. So, and we can very easily imagine that if this wouldn't happen for quite a long time, we would be working on, okay, let's mix those three lights into one light bulb, and it will take just much longer time. So this technology still exists, it's just it's not a dominant design.
But I wonder how much the role here is of the individual inventor, of the engineer, and the psychology of the individual compared to more like structural. So if we want to replicate it, if you want to replicate the spillover, do we need to wait for geniuses or do we need to teach people in a different way, or do we need some kind of structural changes in the future?
All of the above. After having looked at these many cases of spillovers and different technologies, obviously we now, have some, insights that we try to summarize in the paper that I mentioned previously, that we work on summarizing the findings of the overall project from 3 different technologies. And we see that, yes, there are some changes, organizational changes, and that are possible at 4 different levels. So at the level of individuals, at the level of research teams, at the level of research organizations and managers of these organizations, and at the level of funders. Some of these things are quite obvious and have been discussed a lot. That's about supporting interdisciplinarity, supporting training of interdisciplinarity. So you need to have a team composition, that it's not only chemists, you need to have people from different areas. I think one of the most important things here is what we found is that you need freedom of search, but it needs to be guided. So that's like a very tricky balance to have, and it's everyone's job in a sense, specifically for research managers and funders. So some of the most interesting cases of spillovers that we found are where there was a certain goal that people were supposed to reach, and they were just free to explore whatever means to achieve this goal. So that happened both in public setting, in public institutions and universities, where, for example, specific professor, so that was a story from solid state lighting, where a professor got a Leibniz Prize in Germany for his work, and it gave him no strings attached funding to just buy reagents and some other stuff. And he was able, and his students, just doing their regular work, they just explored trying to synthesize new luminescent materials. And he was able to buy a slightly more expensive material, blue rockwell, which is a rare earth, which otherwise he wouldn't be able to buy. And so basically the student wanted to experiment with the material. Okay, sure, yes, you can just buy it and use it. And it's kind of hard to imagine in the current, the way current research funding is structured, if you don't have this more or less flexible money to spend on whatever is needed for this exploration, but also, allowing this exploration. So that was the case, and I think it's very interesting, specifically for Germany, maybe for German research culture, that in this case, the professor just allowed their students to experiment with stuff and do whatever they wanted. So a little bit of a blue sky and discovery. Yeah. And then they eventually, when they synthesized this material, they thought of different applications for it. But then it was very important that they attended some conferences together with some people from industry who worked on this problem of creating these new luminescent materials for phosphors for LEDs. And they realized, oh, you can actually use it as an LED phosphor and not, as a paint as they were supposed to use it originally. So that was very important for this knowledge exchange to happen. So you need to have these events and platforms for this knowledge exchange. Conferences where not only be, scientists, but you need to have people both from industry and, speaking this technical language, but also people who have kind of a broader picture behind it. So it's very important to have these opportunities for knowledge exchange, there's various events, networks that people can learn from each other from different areas.
Yeah.
And then I'd say finally, we saw a very positive example of these large-scale coordination programs that included road mapping of whatever we can see and expect in the future when knowledge can come from. So this DOE program that I mentioned for the photovoltaics in the 70s and the 80s, there was kind of a similar program for solid-state lighting that still exists actually in DOE, but I think it comes without funding at this stage. But for solid-state lighting, which started around mid-2000s or early 2000s, and so it's ongoing. So it brought together people from industry and from public research organizations and universities to just think, okay, where will this technology go next? So they kind of regularly communicated, shared information, even from competing firms, about these potential technological pathways. And then in many cases, it came with, okay, if it's promising, we can fund it.
Yeah.
So receiving this, it's hard to call them coordination program because coordination, like industrial economics, is considered to be a bad thing, from anti-monopolist perspective.
But there are these mission innovations, right?
Yes. So yes, in a sense, yes. So mission-oriented funding is very important. Yes, and it can create this momentum towards a certain goal, but then ideally it should come with be flexible in terms of the means of achieving this. So you need to balance freedom of search, but also kind of ideally put it towards a certain goal. So it should be goal oriented, but flexible research. Again, we found some cases of blue sky research, completely out of the blue discoveries that changed these trajectories of innovation by bringing this external knowledge. But I would say that either they happened in very free, public research institution kind of freedom of exploration environment. So it's important to have this kind of sandboxes for that, I would say. On one hand, but there's still a minority of cases.
You said you're working on a paper that integrates findings from the 3 cases that you and your colleagues have done. And do I understand correctly that it will sort of build up on the existing framework